What is going on, guys? Welcome back. Ryan Moody, Jimmy Smith, our MMA show, here to take a look at UFC 248, which sold me while I was doing some research. I guess in our pre-show, you might not have gotten the impression we were as high up on this card as we could be. We're going to start this off, though, in the welterweight division. Alex Oliveira, Max Griffin. Griffin has some really decent knees from clinch, but I think what he does is a lot of setting things up for takedowns, whether that's with his jabs or whether that's up against the cage. He wants to get this down and wants to get to wrestling. Oliveira on a 3-fight skid, lost to decent names, some explosive fighters, is really unconventional, though. Striking knees, elbows, constantly gives different looks, puts a lot of pressure on his opponent. From the ground, though, he really kind of, I don't want to say he's a one-trick pony. It'd be a kind of a weird thing to say with his nickname, right? But he really hunts a rear naked choke. If he gets it, you're going out. To me, man, when I look at this fight, and I've had the pleasure of seeing Alex Oliveira fight a couple times in person, I just like Max Griffin in this fight for a lot of different reasons. And obviously, I think he's going to get the win here. I think he's got the confidence. I think he's got the momentum. I know he has the tools to win. And I would suspect that on Monday, Bellator might be giving Cowboy a call, or maybe even bare knuckle. I think Oliveira seems like a great bare knuckle candidate, ironically.
Yeah, he certainly could be. And the problem with both of these guys is consistency. That's been the issue. Both guys are talented. Both guys are physical. Both guys, they're momentum fighters. When they're doing well and they're feeling good, they're hard to beat. But when something goes wrong, they don't have the biggest toolkit in the world. Right? They don't have a ton of technical skills to get something back. Alex Oliveira has submission skills. He has striking skills, but they're really unorthodox. His clinch is not pretty and it's smooth, but he can take you down. His submissions aren't great, but as you said, if he gets a rear naked choke, he can put you out. Dude hits hard. You saw the guillotine that he finished Carlos Condit with. He can put you away, but it's that inconsistency that's been a problem. And I think the difficulty is Max Griffin's style is a little bit more consistent because of the takedown hunting. Because of the fact that, the last time he was in a fight that finished was almost 4 years ago. He tends to win long fights by decision. He tends to ground guys down. And I just think stylistically, with two guys that haven't been able to find a lot of consistency in the UFC, who've had their ups and downs, that just might be the difference on a guy in Alex Oliveira, who's lost his last three and might be looking for that explosive rebound. I don't think he gets that against Max Griffin.
We stay with welterweights. Neil Magny versus Jingliang. Jingliang coming in back-to-back knockouts. Probably tells you all you need to know about his power. Strong with his straights, his hooks, balanced on the ground. Defends really well, actually, from his back or in mount. Neil Magny, though, obviously a veteran, right? Fights like one, keeps range well. I think he looks a lot of times to exploit mistakes, limit the damage he takes, fight outside of range. He actually does a very, very nice John Jones-esque would be the only way I could describe it, lead elbow. He's just, a top-tier fighter. I think he's going to be a guy that always provides a true test for an opponent, but I see him dropping this one. I just think he's going to run in a little bit too much pressure, pace, and power than he's used to.
9 times out of 10, or certainly before his fight with Santiago Ponzinibbio, I would have picked Neil Magny in this fight all day. All day. Tall, rangy, dude can take a beating. He has a ton of heart. He was a guy who, if you remember, after the Hector Lombard fight, was in that rarefied air. He beat Kelvin Gastelum, Eric Silva. Is one of those guys where we thought, hey, man, this guy could really be a factor at 170 pounds. Some steps back, but against great names. Lorenz Larkin, RDA, Ponzinibbio in his last one. But I called his fight against Ponzinibbio in Argentina. He got the piss beaten out of him. One of those should have. The hard thing was, I know this is a tough subject to talk about. Did you ever see Boom Boom Mancini versus Dooku Kim, the fight where Dooku Kim died? Famous fight, took place in the 80s. Did you ever see that?
I'm sure I've seen it, but it's not standing out to me right now.
Yeah. The problem with that fight is Dooku Kim kept coming back. Right at that moment where the referee could have stopped it and maybe saved his life, he fought back. There was no moment where you could really stop the fight because every time Dooku Kim should have just curled up and taken a couple more and it would have been over, he kept answering back. And I got that feeling in the Ponzinibbio fight. Not that, I mean, I thought his health was in danger. He was really getting beat up. But every time I was like, okay, this can be stopped. Magny would fight back just enough to stay in it. And Ponzinibbio would put it on him again. And Magny would just, like right when the referee was like, okay, this is over, Magny would answer back with something. And it just prolonged the beating until midway through the fourth round when he finally got knocked out. But I remember going, God, Neil, just when you talk about fighters, Wilder Fury, where Mark Breland threw in the towel, fight another day, save that beating for your next fight. And Magny didn't do that. And yeah, he hasn't fought since then. Bad sign. And he took a beating. I think one of those beatings that like changes careers. Like you're never quite the same guy after that. I hope I'm wrong. I really like Neil Magny. But that factor of long layoff and severe beating, I think Lee has just been more active recently. I don't think he's all in all a better fighter. I think he's just been more active recently, and he's a bad comeback fight.
You went into a dark place on that one.
But that's how I felt watching it. Did you watch it live? Because remember, I was physically there. It was hard to watch. He really got beat up for a long time. I don't mind somebody getting knocked out, boom, and they drop. Like, oh my God, what? Those vicious knockouts, quote unquote, don't scare me that much unless I think someone's got a fractured skull or something. The long, drawn out beating bothers me, and I really felt Neil Magny took a long, drawn out beating in that one. I find those way more difficult to watch.
Yeah, I mean, I want to see an athletic performance. I want to be entertained. Moving up the card, lightweight, Dariush, Klose. Dakar usually comes in right around like 3.5 ounces, kind of dry, oak, cinnamon, some citrus notes. Oh, no, wait, that's the wrong Dakar. I had to make some type of joke in after you just went total death fight on us, Jimmy. But Klose is a great striker.
Gotta lighten
fair
up
ground
somehow.
game. You had to lighten up somehow. I mean, Penny's not there to be our wing dog, so what are we going to do?
Nope. She's on the couch.
Klose is a great striker. Fair ground game. Probably wants to keep this standing, though. Really good leg kicks. Mixes in his combos. Well, powerful hooks, too. Underrated knees. Went back and saw some really good knees. Dariush, I don't think he gets enough credit for his power. Let me just say that. Naturally known for his ground game. Just a guy that, grapples heavy, man. You ever grappled, sometimes there's just that guy that you don't want to deal with because they're heavy. They don't look as heavy as they feel to a degree. He limits exits, passes, generally looks to end fights on the ground. This is really a pick'em fight. A lot of these actually, as we move forward, this kind of starts the good matchup, traditional, one versus the other. I'm going to go with the better striker here in Klose and hope that works out well for me.
I'm going to disagree with you. All your factors are correct. I just think Beneil Dariush, with the experience, he's fought bigger names. First time he was ever on my radar was, I think, the ADCC trials gi, like kind of ADCC gi thing. And he went toe-to-toe with Kron Gracie when he was a brown belt. So Dariush is a brown belt. Kron Gracie's a black belt and smoking everybody. And Dariush, I think, lost by like one advantage or some crazy slim margin. I went, man, who's this guy? Great ground game. And as you said, kind of under the radar, not as respected as he should be, kind of the blue-collar pro in this division, where he's super tough, but beating him doesn't do a lot for you, but it's a miserable fight. And he's had his setbacks against Michael Chiesa, Edson Barbosa, of course, a Hernandez loss. It's like he's never been able to really get over the hump. But he always beats that middling level talent. He's almost that mid-level gatekeeper that doesn't get enough attention, in my opinion. I think his experience and his ground game carry him through a very tough fight in this one.
All right. Look at that timing, Jimmy. What do we got? Maybe 5-7 minutes for each of these. So we're going to start co-main event. Zhang Weili, Zhang, however you want to go about it. Joanna champion. Joanna no longer the champion, however you want to go about it. Joanna, longtime champion, though. Still kind of returning to her more natural weight class. Here's the thing. You mentioned this with Neil Magny, and I think it's good that we transition in. I think the Rose fight shows us a lot about Joanna, and I think that fight took her confidence. We don't see that brash girl anymore. Sure, throws a lot of volume, more a pressure and pace fighter than a power striker. We've seen that At times, she can stand up to that punishment. She's got very good fundamentals. I mean, sound jab, really good kicks, controls distance well. But to me, when you look at, what Zhang did, she came in against Andrade and she proved a lot to me. I mean, basically, I don't want to say that she bullied the bully because I'm not meaning, Jessica Andrade is a bully, but Jessica Andrade was known for her power, known for her slams. And Zhang just basically walked in there, got in her face, and broke her. I mean, no fear, no respect for who she was fighting, no worry of the threat. And we just don't see that power traditionally at this weight class. She's really got nice combos, brutal knees, elbows in close, beautiful, clinch fights. So you basically get that toss up. Can Joanna make rounds on her, or is Zhang going to get through that power strike? And I got to say, when you think back to maybe the second Rose fight, you just don't see that Joanna mystique. We know that she can quit. And if you've ever grappled with somebody, and there's just times where, you know it. You remember the time somebody broke you. And I've been broken. I'm sure you've been broken. When you get into tough spots, your mind goes back there. And you basically say, no, fuck this. I want out of this. And the question to me is, can Weili Zhang put Joanna in that space? Or can Joanna get that rhythm, get that pace? I'm gonna go with Weili Zhang. I feel like she is gonna be able to put Joanna in that dark place where she doesn't want to be, where she hasn't been successful, and we're gonna probably see a fight that's gonna turn a lot of heads and make a lot of believers out of those that aren't already believers.
I think Weili Zhang is the future of this division for a while. I don't know. I mean, that could mean a year. That could mean a couple more fights. I really think she brings something special. Now, Jedrzejczyk is no walkover. And when I saw the rematch with her and Rose Namajunas, that was my test to see whether or not she can be mentally resilient. And yes, she hasn't exactly been the same since the first Rose fight, but that second Rose fight, the rematch, was competitive. Rose won it by 1 round. But it was no walkover. Jedrzejczyk didn't fold. She didn't give up. She tried her best. It's just, I think Rose has her number. Out of her depth against Shevchenko, I don't think there's any shame in that. Obviously got back on the horse against Waterson. But that dominance, I think maybe the division, sure, she slowed down a little bit. Maybe the division has caught up with her. But Weili Zhang, I just think has too many tools. Now, Jedrzejczyk, excellent stand-up, good submission game. She doesn't have the takedown to get it there when she needs it. If things aren't going well on the feet, she can't initiate and get her down. Weili Zhang, I think, can get Jedrzejczyk down. And once she gets her down, I talked to Jessica Aguilar, who fought Weili Zhang, and she said, I've never felt side control like that in my life. Ever. I've never felt pressure like that. And that's saying a lot, because Jags fought a lot of great fighters. And she said, I've never felt control like that in my life. So also, I think, not just about will and heart and comebacks and all these things, strategically, when picking fights, I generally go with the one who can do more. I think Weili Zhang, as good as Joanna Jedrzejczyk is, I think Zhang can do a little bit more. And in long fights, a lot of minutes, a lot of rounds, not a lot of finishes in this weight class. It's about who can bank minutes and rounds. And I think Zhang is just slightly better at that than Jedrzejczyk. So I think Weili Zhang, I think she stays champion, and it's going to take a hell of a fighter to knock her off her pedestal.
To go back to those two fights, I mean, obviously the first fight, Rose got her tapping to strikes, which was a surprise to a lot of us. We don't really see that. When I went back and watched the second fight, what I really was trying to say was I didn't see Joanna as the stronger girl. I saw Rose winning the exchanges.
Yeah.
I don't think that...
Very true.
I don't think mentally she could leave that fight. You're absolutely right in what you said. Could she leave that fight and say, hey, this was a close fight. I put in enough rounds. I maybe only lost by 1. Yes. Could she leave that fight and say, I might have gotten, I might have been taken out by her. I may have tapped strikes for her. Did I show I'm the stronger girl now? I don't think she can do that. And I honestly think that's something that's going to stick with her when she finally faces somebody that's going to present that power back to her. I mean, no disrespect to Tisha Torres or Valentina or Michelle Waterson. I don't think they possess the power, the wilting power that Zhang does that she's going to feel this weekend that she may not have felt since that first time against, Rose, who's really not all that much of a power puncher either. But, when she was getting overwhelmed in that first fight and it was time to go, no disrespect, it was time for her to go. And I think that changes somebody. I don't think she's been back through a fire to test herself mentally to know she's prepared to not wield again.
Yeah. I mean, that's very true. Rose Namajunas was the more powerful striker. Jedrzejczyk still has versatility. She still has great movement. She's not easy to hit. But I just think Weili Zhang has more in the pocket, has more on the ground, has a better takedown. And those three things together, I think that's going to be the issue in a 5-round fight that probably goes the distance.
All right, I would argue that it won't go the distance then, and that it can get stopped.
You think she finishes her?
Yeah, I do. Within 2 or 3.
Really? That soon?
Listen,
that would surprise me. That would surprise me.
If Joanna can't get her rhythm down, then that's going to be her problem. She needs to get that pace. She needs to get that rhythm. She's not used to somebody really not fearing her and mentally being apprehensive in the engaging. That I think that's where she's really, really changed since the Rose fight. The whole, fist in her face and, boogie woman business. I think all that stuff was a front for her confidence. She was a big confidence fighter. And once that got taken, it's tough to come back from that. And I think, I think we're going to see that less confident girl that we don't always see because she's not going to have somebody that comes in and respects who she is. Weili Zhang or Zhang Weili, however you want to go about it again. I mean, she's not going to care about Joanna's name or legacy or I'm going to retire undefeated, any of that shit. She didn't care about it with Jessica Andrade, who was a strong girl, known to be a strong girl. She went in and just threw herself in the fire. I think that's the type of stuff that wilts Joanna. And I feel like this is especially Joanna made a really bad, we haven't talked about this in a while. She made a really bad call to make this a personal fight as, the Rona, as we'll call it, to keep our monetization here, continues to spread everywhere. And I feel like all that did was just make this fight worse for her and shows that, hey, she needed to do things to push her confidence still because it's not where it needs to be.
Interesting. I would pick Weili Zhang to win. I think it's going to be a decision, or if she does beat her, she beats her late. I don't see her catching her the way Rose did. It's possible. But I think if it's going to be a decision, it's going to be a late finish. So you're saying early finish. I think it's going to be a bit late. I think it's semantic. I think Weili Zhang wins this fight.
Moving up, Israel Adesanya, Yoel Romero. Man, Yoel Romero is just a top-level guy. Massive power, massive right hook, uppercuts, world-class wrestling. I mean, guy's a former Olympian. We really haven't seen it a lot. We saw the knee that he caught Rockhold with, the combo that beat Weidman. But you know what? He's really good with a couple things. Number one is pacing. Number two, he really doesn't step back. And he really doesn't need to go wrestling strong. That's the interesting thing. Is he going to do that now? We talked about in the pre-show, he's doing a lot of wrestling drilling, using the bands to kind of help with that power. Is that where he's going to try to get Izzy down to the ground? Because we've seen, a lot of Izzy's danger is with that rhythm, with that pace. The other really interesting thing, when I went back and I watched the Robert Whittaker knockout, when I was taught to throw hooks, it's elbow up, tuck your shoulder into your chin. His knockout of Whittaker was literally like fading back. You don't train someone a fading hook like that. And I mean, he just looks fantastic. I think from confidence, I know this doesn't always add up, and we joked last week about MMA math, but if you think about what's made Israel Adesanya a great fighter, it's his confidence. He will tell you what he's going to do and how he's going to do it. And when he approaches this fight mentally, Robert Whittaker, Izzy did in 2 rounds what Yoel couldn't do in 10. I mean, there's something to that. And this is going to be, to me, just a great clash of styles. And I'm really excited to see this fight.
The one thing that's a huge question mark, Israel Adesanya happened to become champion during an exodus of anyone who would have tested his skills pre-Yoel Romero. He didn't fight Chris Weidman. He didn't fight Jacare. He didn't fight Luke Rockhold. None of those guys fight exactly like Yoel Romero, but they have excellent ground games. And they wouldn't have been dumb enough to stand and trade with Israel Adesanya. They would have tried to take him down and see what they could do there. He never really had to deal with that kind of fighter. A dedicated grappler. And by dedicated, I mean, look, Robert Whittaker can take you down. Kelvin Gastelum can take you down. It isn't their bread and butter. It isn't their go-to style. They certainly don't have the skills of a Yoel Romero. So the problem is, not problem, to me it kind of makes this fight exciting. I don't know how Israel Adesanya deals with this style. I have no idea. Now, the weakness of Yoel Romero is he is explosive. He's muscular. He's strong. Freak athlete. But he explodes and then he stops. And he explodes and then he stops. And he explodes and then he stops. When I called his second fight against Robert Whittaker, it's easy to take rounds away from him. Because he almost never looks the same for 2 minutes in a row. He can explode and destroy, and if you manage to ride that wave, he has to back off and recharge. He just has to. There's nothing he can do about it. It's like a muscle car, you know? He's great off the blocks, and then he burns a lot of gas. He needs to recharge. So, I mean, there's almost never a whole round when he fights consistently. And if you look at, like, for example, the Jacare fight, what happens? He explodes in the first round, has Jacare in a ton of trouble, and then he fades. And Jacare came back in the last 2 rounds, didn't come back enough to win on the judges' scorecard, kind of a close fight. But that's the story of Yoel Romero. And that's what cost him in the Robert Whittaker fights. Whittaker just was consistent. And when Yoel Romero slowed down, Robert Whittaker was able to take over in rounds and in the fight. That's what Israel Adesanya has to do, but that's a veteran move. And this is a guy who doesn't have a lot of octagon experience. He came up really, really quickly. So we're asking a young kid who's an incredibly explosive striker and knockout ability. And I've been high on this kid since he started. You know, I called his debut in Perth and I just couldn't wait to see him again, all these things. And he's taking on an opponent, the likes of which he's never seen, that requires kind of a consistency and a strategy that can take a while to develop. All those things said, I'm going with him to win this fight. But those are all the question marks I have in my mind. That's what I wonder about. He hasn't had to deal with anybody even kind of like this. You know, he rose up so quickly, and all those guys left the division right when he was coming up. So it's tough.
Yeah, I mean, this is a little unfair for you. But what I would say to you as a fan, right, while you were producing the previews, right, as a fan, we were watching a guy that was proving every doubter wrong. Every fight along this way. Derek Brunson, Anderson Silva, Gastelum, Whittaker. Yeah. We were being told, hey, here's why this guy can't win, right? This is why Israel Adesanya will not win this fight. And all he did was prove everybody wrong. To the point that, you know, it's going to sound weird. I don't know that I really see a weakness in his game. I see somebody that constantly evolves, constantly fights to the level of his competition. We talk a lot about fighters that don't do that. He constantly elevates his game to the person he's fighting with. And he's shown, you know, great timing, great accuracy, a really good job of luring people in to those exchanges. Now, to that point, as you mentioned, Yoel might not need to be led in. But when you look at what causes that, it's Israel Adesanya's feints are some of the best feints in the whole division, right? I mean, that's just a guy that's tactical beyond his age, beyond his experience. But a couple good points you made there is Yoel Romero knows this game really well. Some of the things that you talked, I don't want to say negatively about, but listen, to me, when I look at Yoel Romero, this is a guy that knows how to slow fights down, which is what he's going to need to do. He's great at deflecting shots. He fights, you know, very mentally strong. When you talk about the pacing and the explosion, I look at that as a guy that fronts. See, and he agrees. Exactly. He fronts with that fatigue. He fronts with that as really a pathway to the explosiveness, to get a takedown, to get a combo. Is Israel Adesanya going to fall for that? That's what I'm looking forward to. Is he going to take all the lessons he's learned? Because I know a lot of people, even the doubters now, will say, well, Robert Whittaker that Israel Adesanya beat, that wasn't real Robert Whittaker. That was some, lesser version, right? That was some B-side Robert Whittaker. I don't know. I think when I look at this fight, and this is probably going to surprise you, I actually see this fight going Yoel Romero's way. I feel like he has I know that he has the deeper toolbox. And even though I don't see any weaknesses in Israel Adesanya's game, I'm ready to see one. And I think this is going to be the fight we see it. I think, as you mentioned, there was an excess of a lot of guys that could beat Israel Adesanya, but Yoel Romero is still here, and I think he's going to be that guy.
I want to be very clear about something. What some people might perceive as negatives, I just see as questions. I'm not saying Israel Adesanya doesn't have these skills. I'm saying we didn't have to see them. We haven't seen them. We don't know how he deals with a wrestler. Hasn't had to face one yet. This is a guy who got his interim title shot with Kelvin Gastelum without facing a single top 5 middleweight. Now, that's not his fault. Once again, a lot of them just happened to move out of the division right at that moment. So, and he went from his UFC debut to champion in 2 years. In the modern era, that's extremely fast. So, you and I are kind of seeing two sides of the same coin in that I don't see these as negatives on Israel Adesanya. I'm just saying we don't know if we haven't seen him go through some of the talent that we would have liked to see him go through to get where he is. When you look at Yoel Romero, what I see as, when you see us kind of, setting guys up or baiting them into takedown and slowing down, I agree with you. But what I'm saying is that's cost him rounds in crucial situations, right? Maybe he is setting guys up, sure. But still, judges go, the other guy's moving forward and he's not. So that tendency to recharge or set up, or however you want to phrase it, has cost him in really, really close fights. And so, it's the question marks swirling around this fight, to me, make it interesting.
I agree. Like we talked about, clash of styles in both of these main event. Well, the main event and the co-main event. There's not more than one main event, but clash of styles in these fights make fights entertaining night for sure. We will be back after this event with a thumbnail to ruin it for you. We appreciate you checking this out, and we will be back very shortly with more commentary.